Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Political Excess. Today, it's time for my final 2022 Governor's Prediction Map. This is where everything comes together. The debates have happened, if there were any debates. Most of the polls have been released. The race dynamics have taken shape. Candidates are known. The issues are known. And there's definitely still some states that could go either way. But let's get onto the map, and I'll try to comment on most of these states. But we'll start with the safe Democratic states, and these are over a 10-point margin. First up, let's get Hawaii out of the way. I'm actually not completely confident this will definitely be over 10 points. There's no polling, there's no market. Duke Iona is not really the weakest candidate. It's a red-leaning year, it's an open seat. If somehow Josh Green wins by 8 points only, I'm not going to be completely shocked. On the other hand, he could still win by over 20 points, so I'll have to leave that as safe. The next state here is no surprise, that is California. Gavin Newsom is going to win that probably by 21 points or so. Maybe someday the Republicans will win that again, but Brian Dahle, he's not going to be the guy to get it done this year. Let's move along to Colorado. I think Jared Polis is likely to win this by over a 10-point margin. Heidi Ganahl for the Republicans. She's not some horrible candidate, it's just too blue of a state. Polis is too popular, too much of a good fit for the state. So he's going to win that by over 10 points. Let's go all the way over to the East Coast and hit up Maryland. Now this is going to be safe for Wes Moore. Larry Hogan was, I guess, a unique talent to be able to win there in Maryland twice, but Dan Cox is not going to win a third term for a Republican governor there. And the last state is Massachusetts. This is similar to Maryland, where it's an open seat. Charlie Baker was the guy to get it done there, and given that he's not running again, Jeff Deal is going to take the loss for the Republicans, and Maura Healey will cruise to an easy flip in Massachusetts. Now let's go to the safe Republican states. First is Alaska. With ranked choice voting, Mike Dunleavy, I think he's going to win that by over 10. I don't think it's really going to be that close. He might even win by over 15 at this point. Next is Idaho. There's really no news for Idaho. I'm not even sure who the Democrats are running there, but Brad Little, he's going to win another term there. Next is Wyoming, and Mark Gordon should very easily win that by over 10, even over 15 points. Next is South Dakota. There's been some mixed polling that showed Kristi Noem may be in danger of losing, but then there was another poll that showed her very easily winning. If it got under 10, I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm going to say it's over 10 points for Noem. Next is Nebraska. That is an open seat. There's really no polling there, but I'm going to say Jim Pillen wins that by a safe margin. Nebraska is a red state. And given the lack of news about this race, I'm going to say it defaults to its deep red status. Let's jump down to Texas. For a while I had it as a safe margin, then I brought it back down to a lean, and now in my final projection I'm going to say it is just over a 10-point margin for Greg Abbott. Some polls do have it more narrow in the mid-single digits, but I think the remaining undecideds are going to default toward Abbott, and he's going to win by 10 or 11 points. Next in Iowa, Kim Reynolds, that turned out to be really no contest at all, and she's going to win that very easily by way over 10 points. And it's a similar story in Arkansas. We finally did get a poll out there, and Sarah Sanders, she's going to win election there in that open seat very easily, way over 10 points. In Tennessee, Bill Lee, he is poised to win by a huge margin. Unless there's something happening that I'm unaware of, it will be a safe margin in Tennessee. Similar story in Alabama. Kay Ivey is all but certain to win re-election there. Let's go up to Ohio. Not really a surprise here. Mike DeWine, all the polls show him winning by 15, 20 points or more, so he gets a safe for Ohio. Can't forget about Vermont and New Hampshire. Both of these are going to be safe. Phil Scott, I can't imagine him losing, even though he is a Republican in a deep blue state. His very liberal style of governing helps him win by large margins in Vermont. And in New Hampshire, Chris Sununu, he's popular enough to be able to win probably by 15 to 20 points again. So 2 Republican governors for sure in the Northeast. And there is one more state here, and that is going to be Florida. I really did not think this would be a safe margin at all up until probably the last week. But there's been enough polls that showed DeSantis winning this thing by over 10 points. If he ends up winning by 8 or 9, I'm not going to be surprised. I guess I got it wrong then. However, given the hurricane, given his popularity, given his national prominence, I think he is going to win by probably a similar margin as Greg Abbott, 10, 11 points, maybe even gets up to 12. And Charlie Crist is going to lose another statewide race. Alright, so those were all the easy calls. I don't think any of those states will flip at all. Some of the margins could definitely be off. That's certainly a possibility if you're talking about 9 or 10 points or 4 or 5 or 6 points, which brings us to the likely states. Now, these are a 5 to 10 point margin. How about the likely states for the Democrats? Well, first is going to be Illinois. I've seen enough there that shows me Darren Bailey could get this thing under double digits. Pritzker is very likely to win. But at this point, I'm guessing it's going to be about an 8 to 10 point margin, not necessarily a 12 to 14 point margin as it might have looked like a couple of months ago. If Pritzker has a really bad night, Darren Bailey has a really good night, maybe it gets down to about 5.5 to 6 points. The next state is going to be Pennsylvania. It seems like every single poll shows Josh Shapiro with a commanding lead, sometimes even over double digits still. I do think there will probably be a hidden Doug Mastriano vote, but that's not going to be enough to get him a win, and I don't really think it's going to be enough to get it into the low single digits at this point. Maybe it does get under 5, that's a possibility, but right now I'm thinking it's going to be about 5.5 to 6 points for Josh Shapiro. Next is Connecticut. I don't have much to say about this state. It's a rematch with Ned Lamont and Bob Stefanowski. Stefanowski got very close 4 years ago. You'd think with this kind of environment, he might be able to flip it. It doesn't appear so. I'm going to say it's high single digits. Maybe it does get down to mid-single digits. There definitely could be some late breakers there, but Ned Lamont appears to be winning that easily. And one more of these states, and that is going to be Rhode Island. There's really no recent polls for Rhode Island. Incumbent Democrat Dan McKee has been very unpopular. I'm not sure if Ashley Kalus, the Republican, is the right fit for the state. So I'm going to put this one as likely somewhere between a 5 and a 10 point margin for McKee. It's possible it is unexpectedly closer and it gets down to low single digits, but I would be very stunned if it ended up flipping. Let's go on to the likely Republican states. First is going to be Oklahoma. Incumbent Republican Kevin Stitt has seen some polls that show him in jeopardy there. I don't quite think they're going to pan out where he's in that much danger, but it's definitely a possibility that he gets it under a 10-point win. Joy Hoffmeister is probably a reasonable candidate, but the national environment and some of the national issues I think are going to be just too much for Hoffmeister to be able to win. Next is going to be Georgia. It's no surprise Brian Kemp has been leading in basically every single poll, usually by mid-single digits, sometimes even higher than that. I've had it at lean Republican all year, and my final projection is going to be that it goes to a likely margin. I'm going to say about 6.5 points for Brian Kemp. I don't know where Stacey Abrams goes from there. Another statewide loss, back-to-back cycles. But that is definitely going to damage her resume. And finally, one other state that is likely for the Republicans, and that is going to be South Carolina. South Carolina is usually not a total blowout for the governor's elections. I don't know how well Henry McMaster really connects with the voters, but it is a red state. It's a red year. However, Joe Cunningham, the Democratic nominee, he is fairly moderate. He did briefly serve in the U.S. House. I think he could get it down under 10 points. So I will put South Carolina at likely. So those are all the likely states. It's possible one of those out of all of them could flip. That would be unlikely, but they're just not safe enough to where it's a guarantee. Now for the remaining lean and tilt states, let's start East Coast and go to the West Coast. And let's go through these one by one. So a lean margin is under 5 points and a tilt margin is 1 point or less. Let's start in Maine. This I have as a lean for the Democrat Janet Mills. Paul LePage, the former governor, the Republican nominee there, he's won twice. He hasn't really gotten a majority of the vote in either of those wins. And when contrasting him with Janet Mills, I'm just not seeing him have the right kind of fit at this point. And I'm not actually sure what the margin will be, but the safe bet is going to put it at lean. Could there be a crazy upset where LePage wins? I guess. I'm just not seeing that. I think it's actually more likely that Mills wins by over 10 points than LePage winning. But let's move on to New York. This race certainly heated up over the past month. Lee Zeldin, he's made a great run at it with crime and some of the national issues favoring him. But it is New York. It is a very blue state. Could there be an upset where Lee Zeldin flips this and narrowly wins by a quarter point? I guess that's possible. There's a hidden Zeldin, hidden Republican vote that they're just not polling. That would be a significant upset. I don't personally think Kathy Hochul is really all that likable. Lee Zeldin does have a lot of energy. He has some new ideas that New Yorkers haven't seen lately. He's made it very interesting. But my final rating on this is lean Democrat. I would guess Hochul would win by about 4.5 points. There's room there for something crazy to happen, but I would be shocked if it did. The next state is Michigan. This is another state where it's been crazy throughout the primary season with the Republicans, and into the general election, Gretchen Whitmer had a big lead all during the year. I have yet to see Tudor Dixon leading in a single poll. I do realize Gretchen Whitmer is relatively polarizing. Could Tudor Dixon close in here at the very end and pull it out on election day? Yeah, there's a remote chance that could happen. But as of right now, my rating is going to be lean Democrat. I would say Gretchen Whitmer will win by about 2.5 to 3.5 points. The next state is Minnesota. Tim Walz, the incumbent Democrat, he's favored to win. I haven't seen Scott Jensen get enough momentum to actually put him over the top, so this is going to be lean Democrat as well. Any one of these lean states, there's probably about a 15% chance they go the other way, I'd say. But I would be surprised if Tim Walz lost. I think he wins probably by about 4 to 5 points. And I skipped over Wisconsin, but let's take a look at that one right now. And that one I have said is the closest governor's election. It could go either way for sure. Tony Evers, the incumbent Democrat, he's not really all that popular. Wisconsin has really become a polarized state politically. I think Republicans do have more room to grow there in some of those lighter red counties and lighter blue counties that have yet to really go all the way to the right. I'm not exactly sure this is going to be the year. There's a lot of different factors to consider. Tim Michels, I don't think he's really some top-tier candidate. He's polled reasonably well, given the circumstances. I've had this at tilt Republican pretty much all year, and my final rating is going to be tilt Republican. I say Tim Michels wins this by under 1 point. Could Tony Evers win this? Absolutely. But let's move on to the next state, and that is Kansas. This is a fascinating race, like most of these close states. To me, Laura Kelly, the incumbent Democrat, is similar to Tony Evers in Wisconsin. They're both fairly bland in their personalities, not exciting whatsoever. They try to play the moderate route, and I think it's probably reasonably effective. Kansas is a redder state than Wisconsin. Derek Schmidt, the Republican candidate, he is the Attorney General. He does have strong name recognition. You'd think he would be able to win. There was an abortion amendment in Kansas that might have boosted Democratic support. As for polling, there's been a few. Hasn't been a whole lot showing Derek Schmidt with a lead. Laura Kelly is definitely not hitting 50% of the vote, so this has been a very tough call. I've had it at tilt Republican all year. I've long said that Republicans should not get complacent and think this will be an easy flip. It's a very tough call for me. My final rating on this is tilt Democrat. Could Derek Schmidt win this? Absolutely, he could win this. The late breakers and the undecideds could just come home to him and he would win by 3 or 4 points. But I think Laura Kelly probably has just the right kind of approach and style. She'll balance out that Republican supermajority in the legislature. And if I had to pick, I'm going to say Republicans are going to take a loss here, and they'll have another crack at it in 4 years. Next state is New Mexico. I do think this will be closer than expected. For a while, Mark Ronchetti looked like he wasn't really going to be able to get it close enough, and Michelle Lujan Grisham was going to win by 5 to 10 points. I think he's probably a good candidate. I just think it would be better for him going up against an open seat as opposed to an incumbent. But it is a right-leaning year. People know him from his U.S. Senate campaign a couple years ago where he got closer than expected. Plus, he's a TV personality, so that helps him as well. But this is a bit of a blue state. It's not super blue, but it's blue enough. Maybe it is shifting toward the right, but I don't think it's quite there enough yet, even considering all of these factors. And having said all that, I will say this is a lean for the Democrats. There is definitely a small chance somehow Mark Ronchetti pulls it out at the end. But right now I'm going to say Michelle Lujan Grisham wins by 1.5 to 2.5 points. Maybe she has a good night and wins by 5 or 6. That's possible too. The next state is going to be Arizona. I had this at lean Republican all year, well before the primaries. After the primaries, people thought the Republicans might have nominated the wrong candidate. If that's true, I think Democrats nominated the even worse candidate. I understand the polls are close, but Katie Hobbs not debating, I think, was a complete wipeout. I think her explanation for not doing it is unacceptable. I think her explanation for not debating in the Democratic primary makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I don't think her personality is really all that magnetic. Carrie Lake is fired up. She might be viewed as kind of out there, kind of fringe, but she appears ready to go. She's had to go up against the establishment, but the main thing is she does seem like she has the support of most of the voters. A lot of Democrats are not going to be happy, but my rating on this is leans Republican. There could even be more of a hidden vote out there that makes this mid-single digits, but right now I think Carrie Lake will win with anywhere from 2 to 3 points. Let's move on to Nevada. This has incumbent Democrat Steve Sisolak going up against Sheriff of Clark County Joe Lombardo. My rating on this most of the year was lean Democratic. I changed it to tilt Democratic last month. A lot of the polls have actually shown Joe Lombardo with a slight edge. Some have shown it tied or Steve Sisolak with an edge. There's definitely issues in Nevada with working class voters. There are concerns about the lockdown and crime. I do think Joe Lombardo is a reasonable candidate for the Republicans. I'm not counting out Steve Sisolak whatsoever. There could be an underestimation of Democratic support in the polls. I really went back and forth on this. I spent a lot of time trying to decide how to rate this, and my final rating on this is tilt Republican. This is similar to Kansas for me, where I'm changing my rating here right before Election Day, but I think I've seen just enough to where Joe Lombardo will barely squeak out a win, probably under 1 point. And finally, the last state is Oregon. This might be the most fascinating race out of all of them this year. It's an open seat. Outgoing Governor Democrat Kate Brown is very unpopular. It started out as a 3-person race. The independent candidate, Betsy Johnson, is a former Democrat. She's definitely viewed as more moderate. Her support has kind of dwindled here in the final month. So are those voters going to come home to Tina Kotek, the Democrat, or have they had enough with some of the issues in Oregon, crime, homelessness, and are they going to try something new and go for Christine Drazan, the Republican? I'm really not sure. The dynamics of having a 3-person race make it extra hard to analyze. Oregon has not elected a Republican governor in 40 years. It's definitely a blue state on a national and federal level, but state politics are different. And I'm not going to be surprised either way on this race. Christine Drazan has led a little bit more often in the polls. I am concerned that Tina Kotek could still win this on Election Day. But my rating for this race is going to be tilt Republican. And that is my map, and that would result in 29 Republican governors, 21 Democratic governors. There's a lot of very close states here. A bunch of them could definitely go the other way. But this is the best I could do with what I've seen in all these different states. I've followed most of these races moderately closely. There's probably going to be 1 or 2 notable upsets or large polling errors. Who knows where they'll be. You could make a case for tweaking some of these margins or maybe even flipping a couple. It's going to be tough to get all these right. If I only miss 1 or 2 of these, I think I'll take that as a nice victory. But we'll definitely see how it goes if we get all the answers on election night. It's going to be a blast. I do plan on trying to do a live stream, so check that out if you'd like. But let me know in the comments, what do you think of this map? How would your map be different? Do you agree with this, or do you disagree with 4 or 5 of these? That's fine. Let me know down below. And if you enjoy this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.